Welcome to Late Edition Beat Chronicles. I'm your host, Nat Cardona. In this episode, we're continuing the exploration of a niche area of true crime stories, the obsession that fans seem to have with killer wives and mothers. We're back with Diane Berg, a professor at Clark University and author of the article, What's Behind Our Enduring Fascination with Wives and Mothers Who Kill? She is very much an expert on this complex topic. If you haven't listened to the first episode, go back and listen to the first half of my interview, please. Otherwise, we pick up the conversation back up by discussing some causes of what makes mothers and wives kill. I'm a mother myself, and I'm actually pregnant. I'm going to have a baby in 4 weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm kind of going through all of these things and, very much in the, what makes me different from these other women who have done this historically or in more recent history. But the thing that comes to mind is there is just something so grabbing about when women do this, because you carry the child for so long and you birth the child, and it's so much more intimate than the father who's removed and can kind of clean his hands in the sense of when there is a murder. He can kind of, and that's because he's not involved so in the natural process of pregnancy and birth. So yeah, when there are these women historically or modern day that do this, it's like, how, you just sit there and go, how could this happen? How could this happen? And you do the next point I want to get at is the openness nowadays that we have about talking about postpartum depression, because there seems to be a link with that, postpartum psychosis. And you mentioned it's Lindsay Clancy, who's kind of the most recent with that. So in your research, and is something you mentioned, I just want to clarify, you've seen a difference between, let's say 20, 30 years ago media coverage and nowadays media coverage of like just jump into that.
Okay. I mean, I kind of want to take those in order, if I may. First, going back to what you were talking about, how, when a man does it, yes, that's terrible and bad, and they're bad people. But when a woman does it, when a mother does it, especially, there's all this kind of language of the unnatural and the monstrous. And again, going back to, right now I've been rereading Euripides' Medea all week to get ready for this class, because Medea is like the murderous mother, right? And a lot of times these early modern mothers who kill their children, who, as you point out, statistically are fewer than men who kill their children. Then as now, like men commit way more domestic violence than women do, but women do it, it gets more attention. And it's because of this unnaturalness, right? Women, mothers, are supposed to be, as you say, it's the natural process whereby we actually incubate the child. And there's a lot of that kind of language of like, how could she, like a bloody tiger, a tiger wouldn't do a thing like this. A snake wouldn't do a thing like this. The child that she nursed in her body full 40 weeks and fed with her breasts. And there's all this kind of language of like how unnatural this is, that you would destroy your own creation in this way. And I think that's really deep. Obviously, that plays in, I think, at a really macro level, it plays into fears about like God destroying the earth. But I think on the more kind of social and cultural level, it just flies in the face of everything that women are supposed to be. We're supposed to be kind and gentle and nurturing and giving and selfless. And all of these things are intimately tied up with our concept of the mother, right? The mother just gives and gives and gives. The mother is a vessel that never runs dry, right? That's what it's supposed to be. And so if a mother not only fails to deliver on all those counts, but actually turns on her children and even destroys them, this like taps into, I think, some really elemental fears. And I think that's why we're so interested in it. And I think that's why we stay interested in it. And as a mother, I'm a mother as well. I think it strikes a particular chord because it's that, on the one hand, yes, there's that Schadenfreude, right? There's that, well, I didn't do that. you didn't do that. Yeah, my kid cried all day too, but I didn't, throw him out a window. There's that. But there's also the more interesting thing is that on some level, I think anyone who has ever had to care for a small child, an infant, especially if you have recently given birth and your own body and your own mind are still, you're not yourself yet. I think anyone who's been in that position has been that exhausted, that frustrated, felt that inadequate, felt how hard it is to live up to all those things I just enumerated that mothers are supposed to be, can understand how it happens. And that's terrifying. That there, but for the grace of God, go I, right? That if I hadn't had my support network, if I hadn't had my level of education, if I hadn't known how to find help, right? That I might have done a thing like that. And I think that's why we can't look away. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that is actually one of the notes that I was just rereading here, is that it's hard to make peace with that because, whether it be, okay, so like take guys who commit murder, there's often you find out that they had childhood trauma, they were abused, but then there's plenty of people that say, well, so was I, but I didn't kill 5 people. It's kind of the same thing here. There's so many women who deal with postpartum depression, and then it's very easy to say, well, I didn't do that and I would never think of doing that. But it's exactly what you say. It's when you stare it in the face, it's like, well, it's a really thin line of what, the possibility of it. It's a weird thing to kind of, I just grapple with and iron out.
Yeah. And if there's actually, things out of whack that would respond to medication, this isn't just this goes beyond just being exhausted and being overwhelmed and feeling inadequate, all of which are incredibly legitimate things that, I certainly experienced as a mother of 3 children. But then you actually add in some sort of, chemical balance or mental illness, or, various factors. Women have no resources. They have no help. They have no money. No one cares about them. We have a government that cares very much about fetuses, or at least claims to care very much about fetuses. It doesn't care so much about babies or their mothers, if they wind up needing extra help. So in answer to your question about sort of coverage of these things, I do think, and I hope I'm not being optimistic, I do think that I'm seeing a shift in the coverage. It's not that there wasn't any mention when the Yates murders happened in 2001, or maybe, 2001. There was talk of the fact that this woman hadn't, for one reason or another, she didn't get the care that she needed. And there were a lot of factors at play there. She and her husband were evangelical Christians. They were part of this Quiverful movement, which basically they want you to have as many children for Jesus as possible. It's God's will. You just keep having children as long as God sends them to you. She was homeschooling them all. She had already had, I can't remember now if it was after her second or third child, she'd had a pretty serious case of postpartum depression, to the point where her gynecologist said she shouldn't have any more children. This is going to happen again. It's going to get worse. But they had, I think, 2 more children after that anyway. She was being insufficiently monitored. I mean, there was a lot of talk about the fact that this woman was in her own way a victim. And there was a lot of finger pointing at the husband, whose name was Rusty Yates, for continuing to, have children with her and allowing her to homeschool the children. She had 5 children under the age of 7 and, wasn't taking her medication. And there was a lot going on there. So it wasn't that the coverage of her was completely unsympathetic, but there was an awful lot of, she's a monster. She couldn't have done it because the insanity defense, they're doing the same thing with Lindsay Clancy. The prosecution is saying, well, no, she can't have been insane because she knew what she was doing. She was able to make a plan and carry it out. Both Lindsay Clancy, Indra Yates, and Margaret Vincent, for that matter, waited until their husbands were away and they knew they had a window in order to commit the crimes. And the prosecution in Clancy's case and in Yates's case have argued that that's impossible, because if she was insane, she couldn't have made a plan, she couldn't have carried it out, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, we know that's not true. People suffering from psychosis can make plans and carry them out all the time. Mm-hmm. Andrew Yates was initially charged with first-degree murder and found guilty. And the jury they could have given her the death penalty. They didn't, but they sentenced her to life in prison initially. And then they appealed several years later using an insanity defense, which succeeded. I don't actually think, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that the passage of 22 years is going to have made a difference in the Lindsay Clancy case. She's, remains in a psychiatric facility. I think that there would be a great outcry if she actually were brought to trial for murder charges. I think that there's been so much more in the press about postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis in the wake of Lindsay Clancy's. It's a crime. I hesitate to use that word, but in the wake of this very tragic incident, there's been so much more coverage of that, and a lot more people coming forward, a lot of kind of op-ed pieces, people saying, I have postpartum depression, this is what it's like. Again, that could have been me. So I feel like there's a broader discussion about it. And it was just, I think 2 weeks ago, that the government approved this medication for women with postpartum depression, to be more widely distributed, which I feel is like a huge step forward. And, I can talk about this all day. Mm-hmm. At the root of this, the fact that it's 2023 and we're only now, it seems like having a really serious conversation about this just speaks to the degree to which women's issues are always pushed down the list, right? Women's health, women's well-being, women's mental health. It's always bumped down the list. And of course, again, we're going back to mothers, right? Mothers aren't supposed to need anything. We're supposed to take care of everyone all the time, and no one takes care of us. So I feel like, yes, progress, but wow, it's, the 21st century.
I know.
We need to take a quick break, so don't go too far.
It's fascinating to me, and I wonder if it's repeatedly fascinating to you. Just if this small increment of time is where we're starting to see that little switch turn to, more in the favor of the other possibilities that could be at play here. But 2023 compared to, 1616.
Yeah, right.
We're not, how in the media things are typecasted with these types of crimes. For it to be so not that much different is, how many things can you, how many topics can you say are like that?
That's a great question, right? Yeah. So, Margaret Vincent, she said ultimately that she had been, she had fallen under evil influences, and basically the devil made her do it. And, there's this great woodcut on the cover of the pamphlet about her, which is called A Pitiless Mother. It goes on, but we'll just call it A Pitiless Mother for the sake of brevity, that shows her with her children, and she's strangling them, and the devil is standing behind her, and he's got horns and claws, and he's basically making her do it. And after she had been in prison, when she was apprehended, she said that she had been, laboring under this terrible delusion, and there had been like Roman Catholic neighbors who were trying to persuade her to become a Catholic, and that's like a bad influence at this time. And once she had been spoken to at length by a proper, Protestant minister, she repented and recanted. And obviously she had to be hanged for it, but she at least was able to repent and make her peace. And so like the end game of the pamphlet is that since she was truly repentant, maybe she can be saved, right? Like her body has to die, but maybe her soul can still be saved. But the important part is the repentance, right? Kind of say, yes, I did that. Yes, it was wrong. in those days, I like to say yesterday's demonic possession might be today's postpartum psychosis, or the other way around, right? That, these behaviors, there's got to be some kind of there has to be an explanation. There has to be a reason. So, if it's that, I have a chemical imbalance and I need to, take medication and be treated for it, or like, oh, like I was actually possessed by a demon. When this happened, there has to be some kind of resolution, and you have to be sorry.
Do you know off the top of your head with Lindsay Clancy if she's said anything?
Yeah, she said at her arraignment, or I guess she didn't speak at her arraignment, but her counsel said that she heard a voice in her head when her husband was gone. She sent her husband out on an errand. He was working from home because she was sick. He had been working from home, and she was doing well, apparently, seemed to be doing well, and had a good day with the children, playing outside in the snow. And he was working from his home office, and she texted him or called him and said, let's get takeout. And he said, yeah. And so she sent him to a place that was about a half hour's drive away. And she said that she heard a voice in her head telling her that she had to do it now, because if she didn't do it now, she wouldn't have another chance. That sounds pretty psychotic to me. Right. Andrea Yates said something pretty similar, that, she knew that she would have to do it now. This was the chance, and she had to take it. And something would have prevented them from doing these things if they hadn't taken these opportunities, created, these opportunities and taken them. That's all we've really heard from her thus far. But apparently she told her husband that she'd done it. The husband has argued very movingly, I think, that she deserves compassion and not condemnation. And like if he can forgive her, then then the people on Facebook comment threads should probably dig deep and either find compassion or find the ability to get off that Facebook comment thread, right?
Oh my gosh, amen to that. I mean, and that kind of brings me to my parting thoughts here. Was how you ended your piece was there. It seems to be that there's two lanes of thought here when someone's digesting all of the true crime that they can, especially when it comes to wives of mothers. It seems it's the what did you call it? The Schadenfreude? I can't.
Yeah, Schadenfreude.
Yeah, like that's.
Yeah, it just means the kind of it's a nasty word, and there isn't a word in English that means this exactly. It basically means the sort of pleasure, often a kind of guilty pleasure we take in the misfortunes of others.
Yeah,
which
feels very Facebook commenty. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. So when the Lindsay Clancy situation occurred. My immediate thought was like, oh my goodness, like, social media, like that's going to be an absolute pit of despair. The things that people's hot takes, right? But I feel like that visceral reaction that people have, where they feel like they have to get in there and say, like, she's a monster and she should go to hell. Oh, those poor little angels, et cetera, et cetera. That's very much part and parcel of that, pushing it away. That can't be me. I'm not like that. I'm not like that. I'm not a person who will kill my children. I'm not a person who would kill my husband. I'm not a person who, would do XYZ terrible thing. And so I have to jump in here and do this very kind of like performative public condemnation of this thing to kind of distance myself from it, but also kind of reassure myself that,
right.
Oh, that's not me. I'm different than that. I'm better than that.
Right. And then it's actually the flip side of things. The other lane is what you had mentioned, is that the appeal might lie in the fact that, that light bulb saying we might be capable of these things. It's kind of and the thought that immediately came to me, and this is always how I've felt about true crime, especially on this topic, is like, it's better to what is it? The devil you know versus the devil you don't. Yeah. Right. And that's just where I'm at.
Well, I've been, again, I've sort of been down this kind of classical tragedy rabbit hole this week. I was come back to what do we get out of this kind of stuff? Like, here you are, you confess to being like, you're constantly devouring this material, right? I do it. Lots of people I know do it. True crime, has been so massive in recent years, right? People just devour this stuff. I mean, it's always been very popular, but it does seem like it's really kind of having a moment culturally. There's what we get from this stuff is catharsis, right? I mean, it's the same thing as classical tragedy, right? We watch the terrible thing happen, but the terrible thing hasn't happened to us. Now, if we're talking about a drama, if we're talking about Medea or Oedipus Rex or even Hamlet, the bodies are littering the stage and all these terrible things have happened. We have the purging of pity and terror that comes, but no one has actually died. Nothing terrible has actually happened. We leave the theater feeling kind of scoured out, and then we go and we get a coffee and we chat about it, right? But with the true crime stuff, someone has died. A real tragedy has occurred. And yet I still feel like it's that catharsis that, we see it, we watch it. People watch these trials when they can, right? They need to see how it ends, and then they can walk away from it. And it hasn't happened to us, right? Mm-hmm. We sort of had the purging of pity and terror, but something terrible really has happened. And still, it's not like when a play is over and now the play is over. As you say, these stories happen over and over again.
It's so, they're so accessible.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, yeah. And then there's that other, go ahead.
No, it's just kind of, I just feel like this appeal is kind of timeless, and it speaks to something in like the human condition. And I'm not sure it's a very nice thing in the human condition. But it certainly is there.
That's my thinking exactly. Yeah. It's that really, it all ties in together. It's just, definitely something to chew on. Geez. I mean, what's next for you in this grand scheme of things and this topic going forward? I mean, that's kind of a really open-ended question.
I'm excited for this course I'm going to start teaching on Monday, which is, again, we're going to start with Medea, and we're moving on to some infanticidal mothers, and then we're going to move on to some women who kill we're moving on to petty tyrants after that. So we'll have some texts about fathers who abuse their authority by killing their wives and or children. And we're going to end up with wives who kill their husbands, sort of petty traitors. And I will be putting kind of early modern texts in conversation with more modern cases throughout the semester. So I think it's going to be really fun and interesting. And I'm hoping I have every intention of writing a book, which is, I have a title. It's going to be the same title as my seminar, actually, pulp nonfiction, true crime and fake news in early modern England. So that's my next big project. I'm currently working on a what I think is going to be a more public facing piece, which is kind of different, but kind of not. It's actually about Barbie and Paradise Lost, Milton's Paradise Lost, which I think is kind of interesting, as sort of Barbie land as a kind of Eden, and Ken as a kind of Adam figure. But that's what I'm kind of working on right now on the side. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I think going forward, it's going to kind of be more murder and mayhem for me.
Safe to say. That's just a lifestyle, right?
I hasten to add, I'm actually a very nice person, and it's very funny that I have 3 children of my own, and I think they think they're a little bemused that this is kind of like my reputation. I was once at a conference, and I was introduced to someone, and he said, "Oh, you're the infanticide woman," and I was like, "Please don't call me that." But you know, yeah, I have children. I have dogs and cats. I'm a nice person. I swear to God. I'm vegan. I've been vegan for a very long time. So, yeah, this is all purely intellectual. I assure you. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, thanks for mentioning all of that. And is there any way, if a listener is interested in following you and is not obviously at one of your classes at university, one of your seminars at university, is there a way that people can follow what you're doing or publishing?
I'm not really very, I am not on Twitter or whatever it's called this week.
It's okay.
Perhaps going forward at this point, mainly, just through what I publish.
Yep.
And through Clark University. I teach English at Clark University in Massachusetts.
Okay. So good Google search. People can figure it out.
And that is that, my friends. Special thanks to Diane Berg for joining the show and giving us a look at what's mesmerized true crime fans for centuries. Thanks for listening to Late Edition Crime Beat Chronicles. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. See you later.